Okay then, so in this video today, I want to talk about ATP, Adenosine Triphosphate. This is the energy currency of the body. So similar to how a car runs on diesel, say, or petrol, the body runs on ATP. Alright, so we've got three different ways of generating ATP in the body. Two are anaerobic and one is aerobic. So we'll start off with one of the anaerobic systems that we use. So this is your creatine phosphate system or phosphocreatine system. Now, this system will only supply energy for a short burst of time, so you're looking at maybe 10 to 20 seconds. It's quick to deplete, obviously, but it's also quite quick to replenish as well. You're looking at about 30 seconds to a minute for half of your stores to replenish, and within about 5 minutes you'll have 90 to maybe even 100% replenished. So you'll find this typically in sports and scenarios that are quick bursts of energy, things such as like powerlifting, some short sprints and things like that. So basically what happens when you're breaking down ATP, so as it says, adenosine triphosphate, so there's 3 phosphates you've got there. So you'll lose one during the output and the exercise, and then you need to replenish that extra phosphate to take it from adenosine diphosphate back up to adenosine triphosphate. That's how this system works. So through the use of creatine, however you want to pronounce it, it replenishes that phosphate, but again, it only lasts for a very short amount of time. The other anaerobic system for supplying ATP and generating ATP is the lactate system, otherwise known as anaerobic glycolysis. So this system will last a bit longer, and it uses glycogen for fuel. So as you know, glycogen in the body, when you ingest it as glucose from carbohydrates, it will be in the body in the blood, muscle and the liver. So the glycogen that's stored, whether it be in the muscle or liver, can then create ATP for around 90 to 120 seconds, maybe a bit longer, obviously depends on the person's ability and how fit and healthy they are. So you're looking at type 2 muscle fibres going to be used predominantly within that working environment. And one thing you want to look at with lactate system training, you'll be looking at the onset of blood lactate accumulation. So this is where, when we're doing the exercise, the level of blood lactate is increasing, and you'll generally find it around 2 millimoles per litre, that you can sort of still exercise and you're at that lactate threshold kind of training, which is where you want to be. It seems as though once you get up to around 4 millimole per litre is when the onset of blood lactate accumulation really hits, and blood lactate rushes up and you'll find you get that burning kind of feeling in the muscle. Well, that's now because the body isn't able to get rid of the byproduct being lactic acid. So yeah, around 4 millimole that sort of occurs. So that's the breakdown there. So from glycogen, so glucose having 6 hydrogens, then breaks down into 2 pyruvic acid, and then from there, without the oxygen, it's turned into lactic acid, which gives you that burning sensation during the exercise. So as it says, similar to creatine phosphate, it's instantly available upon demand, as glycogen and glucose is, because as I said already, it's stored blood, muscle and liver. So a good example of this would be like a 400 metre run, 800 metre run. something like that. So that broadly covers the anaerobic modalities of generating ATP. We'll go on to the aerobic now, and the aerobic doesn't have a fancy name, it is just aerobic training. So in regards to producing ATP, this is the optimal source. You'll get the most amount of ATP produced, but it is at lower intensities. So through aerobic respiration, we know we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out predominantly carbon dioxide and water vapour. So when we're doing that, we're breathing in the oxygen, but we're also using a mixture of fatty acids and glucose. Now, whether you're using one or the other, it's never simply you're using fat or simply you're using glucose. It'll always be a mixture when you're using the aerobic system. You want to see it as sort of like two pedals in a car. So if you had two gas pedals instead of just one in your car, you could have your left foot on one and right foot on the other. Now, with the lower intensity, you'll be using more fats. So you can put your foot down harder on the fat pedal, using more fat, but you'll also be putting a bit of pressure on the glucose pedal as well, because you're still going to be using a bit of glucose. And similar for as that intensity increases, say we're doing another run, a long distance run, but short enough that the intensity can be pretty high. So a bit of blood lactate, but not to the point of your unset blood lactate accumulation. So if you're at that intensity, it's going to be heavier on glucose and less on fat. So either way, for aerobic respiration, we're using both fat and glucose. So it can sustain activity for hours. So that's the difference between aerobic and your anaerobic systems. The aerobic, provided it's at a lower intensity, can sustain for hours on end. Whereas the other two, as we've already said, short bursts for creatine phosphate, and again pretty short, up to 2 minutes, possibly a bit longer if you're well trained, for the lactate system. So a good example, marathon, triathlon, anything endurance based. So there's one more point at the bottom there that I just want to touch on, which is gluconeogenesis. Now, where we've said that aerobic production of ATP is through glucose and fatty acids, it can also be through protein, and this is a lot more of a complex generation of energy. But ultimately, if we don't have enough glucose and fats, predominantly if we run out of glucose, so we're in a starvation mode, maybe fasted or in an extreme deficit, whatever the case, if we don't have that fuel source there, then our body will convert protein into energy through the process of gluconeogenesis. We won't get too much into that. So overall, I think that covers it pretty broadly. So yeah, basically the body runs on ATP. That's how it produces its energy in the mitochondria of the cells. And yeah, you've got your anaerobic, which is your creatine phosphate, and your lactate or your anaerobic glycolysis. And alternatively, you have your aerobic means of generating ATP. So I hope you stuck with it and learnt something from that. If you want any more knowledge on it or on anything else, don't hesitate to give me a message, direct message, comment, whatever, and I'll get back to you and try and help you out as best I can. Okay.